have to be afraid. God has great plans for you. This child is his way.
The Omen movies are one of those horror movies I found very creepy as a kid. I always thought Damon was one of the scariest horror characters ever. Especially the first Omen movie, directed by Richard Donner, who also directed the first Superman movie and has done Lethal Weapon and some other great movies. His direction in that movie and overall style made that first Omen movie one of the creepiest horror movies ever made. That tone of dread and keeping tension throughout the movie has only been matched by movies like The Exorcist and The Shining. So when I heard that they were doing a prequel to the first 3 Omen movies, I was skeptical, because rarely do we get a good prequel. There is maybe a handful of prequels that are actually good. Usually, prequels are a way for studios to make more money out of property, milking it to where there is no mystery left. But I'm happy to say that this movie is not anything like that. It is a greatly directed movie with a cast that gives their all in their roles and has a story that fits very well into the rest of the Omen movies. Now I will be going over the story of this new installment in the Omen franchise, so there will be spoilers if you have not seen it yet. The first Omen is a 2024 American supernatural horror film, directed by Arkasha Stevenson, who co-wrote the screenplay with Tim Smith and Keith Thomas from a story by Ben Jacoby. It is a prequel to The Omen from 1976, being the 6th film in the Omen franchise. The film stars Neil Tiger Free, Tawfiq Baroum, Sonia Braga, Ralph Ineson, and Bill Nighy. The plot follows an American woman sent to work at a church in Rome who uncovers a sinister conspiracy to bring about the birth of the Antichrist. Father Brennan presses Father Harris about the photo of a baby, Sienna, but Harris is unable to speak of it. He mentions it was an unnatural birth. On the church steps, a construction accident ensues, and the pipe falls, cleaving a back portion of Harris' skull and brain off. He is left with a bloody grimace. In Rome, 1971, amid left-wing protests, American novitiate Margaret Dano arrives at Vizardelli Orphanage to take her vows. There she meets 5 people: young artist Carlita, eccentric roommate Luz, odd-mannered Angelica, Cardinal Lawrence and Sister Sylvia, the abbess. Carlita shows Margaret a drawing of figures restraining a woman onto a bed in their room one night. Margaret tells Luz that Cardinal Lawrence has been in her life forever and has helped her improve as a person. Luz tells Margaret that they need to enjoy themselves before their vows, and both attend a disco, where Margaret dances with a man named Paolo and then blacks out, with no memory of what happened, but is reassured by Luz the next day that nothing bad happened. At the orphanage, she witnesses a woman giving birth, where a demonic hand sprawls out of the mother's birth canal. She faints. Margaret quickly forms a bond with Carlita, noticing her active mistreatment by the nuns, including locking her in an isolated room and keeping her away from others. She mentions to Carlita that she was similar during her childhood, having vivid auditory and visual hallucinations. Later, Father Brennan approaches Margaret and warns her about Carlita, saying evil things will begin to happen around her. Margaret spots Angelica with Carlita and is shown a drawing of a pregnant woman being restrained. Margaret shuns her and calls it inappropriate. Shortly after, Angelica, doused in gasoline atop the abbey, says it's all for you, then self-immolates and hangs herself. Margaret confides in Brennan, who explains that radicals within the church, who fear losing power due to the rise of secularism, seek to bring the Antichrist into the world to create a fair and drive people back to the church. Carlita is intended to be his mother. He shows her his photo for proof. Margaret refuses to believe but agrees to steal Carlita's files for him. Margaret unsuccessfully questions Father Gabriel about Carlita's past. The nuns arrange a visit to an art museum and Margaret attempts to pry Carlita about her past to no avail. A riot breaks out and as the nuns and orphans evacuate, Margaret is caught amidst the chaos. She witnesses hallucinations of the demonic hand grabbing her, which is seen by Sister Sylvia, despite nothing being there. Sylvia then forces Margaret to leave the orphanage and denies her vows. Leaving, Margaret spots and pursues Paolo. Paolo is horrified and tells her to look for the mark, before being hit by an oncoming truck and impaled against the wall. Margaret attempts to save him but accidentally splits him in two. Margaret slips out as Luz takes her vows, sneaking off into the building basement to find the files. She discovers 14 subject files, each photo showing a baby with a visible 666 mark, all labeled Sienna and disfigured except for one. She rushes off with the files and heads to Carlita's room, swearing to protect her and escape with her as she hides the files under Carlita's bed. The sisters come in to restrain Margaret, and she notices the mark on the palate of a screaming Carlita's mouth. Margaret is locked in the bad room, where Carlita is often imprisoned. She hears voices that seem to be coming from satanic drawings throughout the room. She sees a hallucination of a burnt Angelica coming near her. At night, Father Gabriel brings the files, unlocks the door and saves her, revealing his solidarity with Brennan. Margaret notices Carlita doesn't bear the 666 mark on her head, despite it being in Brennan's photo. All three examine the files and Margaret links the photo to another file, figuring that another attempted baby survived. Realizing she has been a ward of the church her entire life, Margaret feels her scalp and finds the mark, confirmed by a second look by Brennan. A hallucination shows her being impregnated by the prior demonic entity the night she blacked out at the disco. Terrified of what's in her, she demands an abortion. Brennan tells her this is unlikely as it is midnight of June 6th, and the sisters will be coming for her. On the way, their car crashes, but Margaret is unaffected. She convulses violently. Her water breaks, her womb suddenly fills, and she passes out. She awakens strapped down, and Lawrence reveals his plan for this for years. All individuals from Wizardelli are present. She gives birth to two children, a boy and a girl. The boy is heralded as the Antichrist. Margaret asks to hold it and stabs Lawrence in the throat, then almost kills her baby before Luz stabs Margaret in the stomach. The building is set ablaze, but Carlita saves Margaret and the girl. Margaret has a vision of her assaulter, the demonic jackal, burning. The members of Wizardelli organize a secret adoption, in which the boy is given to American diplomat Robert Thorne to secretly replace the dead unborn child of his wife's supposed miscarriage. Years later, Margaret, Carlita, and the girl have become a happy, secluded family. Brennan arrives to warn Margaret of Wizardelli, knowing she is still alive, and says the boy has a name now, Damien. So that was the story of the first Omen 2024, and this movie really is filled with dread, and it is a very tension-filled movie, so in that way it really respects the first Donner-directed movie. The script mostly follows the main character, but the other minor characters also have arcs and are functional within the story. The cinematography is also great, with some great camera movement, framing, lighting, and composition. The performances from the actors are great, especially from Nell Tiger-Free, who really gives a great performance when it comes to horror, and it is her character that we mostly follow, and the character is very well written too. The cinematography mixes wide shots with extreme close-ups, and the editing really amplifies the style of the movie. It feels very intimate and you get characters up close. Camera movement adds an eerie feeling, and it is a very fluid but horrifying style, which contrasts that most of the movie is kind of bright because it's mostly taken place in daylights and in Italy in the summer. Director Akasha Stevenson makes her big screen debut with this movie, and it is a very impressive first movie. She did have experience in TV shows, but she had not made a movie before this one. He focuses more on symbolism than having CGI creatures and jump scares. The movie does have some pacing issues though, and it's not for people that do like to have a lot of gore in their horror movies. But it is so far the best horror movie of this year, without a doubt. I am giving this movie an 8 out of 10. If you liked this review, please like, share and subscribe. This has been Boogeyman Cinema. Thank you for watching. If you have seen the first Omen, what did you think about it?